Hi. Hello, I'm Jason. I am the editor here at Quadra, and they just wanted me to come on real quick to let you know that there were a couple of technical difficulties in this episode. These were shot and recorded before I came onto the scene, before I started working here at Quadra. So because of that, I've tried my best to master and restore some of the audio and video elements of these episodes of the podcast. So yes, the content here is great. The conversation's phenomenal. Just be advised that there are a couple of technical difficulties. All right, enjoy the episode. Goodbye.
And then she gives me the sales pitch on chemo. It's going to be over a year, and it's going to be brutal, and it's going to be the worst thing you've ever done in your life. And I said, okay, so if I do chemo, like, there's no chance it'll come back? Oh, it'll lessen it by about 15%. I'm like,
15%. Yeah.
You want me to do a year and just be in hell for a year for 15%? I'm like, nah, you're a horrible salesman.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Ecom Life Podcast. Today we have a super special guest. I have with me today Steve Vail. He's a key employee at Mind and Body. He's also a color commentator for BYU volleyball, and he has an incredible story about resilience and overcoming massive odds. And so, Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate the intro. That was very nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where did you grow up? A little bit about, bit about you growing up.
I was born in 1970 in Santa Barbara, California. The youngest of five. I have three older brothers, one older sister. I'm the baby. Folks moved a few years ago up to Meridian, which is near Boise, Idaho. So they're up there now. I've been in Utah basically since I graduated high school in 1988. And lived here a couple of years, went on an LDS mission to Sydney, Australia, and then came right back and made the club volleyball team and never looked back.
Yeah, man, that's kind of your story. That's kind of how I know you. You're the stud back in the day playing some volleyball.
It was a lot of fun.
So how did, let's just talk volleyball a little bit. How did you even get into volleyball? Is that something you played in high school or?
Yeah, I have. So my second oldest brother, his name's Rob. He played for BYU's club team before they went NCAA in the 80s. And there was a big tournament in Santa Barbara at UCSB called the Elephant Bar Tournament. Mm-hmm. And so all of the BYU guys would come down and they'd stay at our house and then play in that tournament all weekend. And I was like in either junior high or high school when this was going on. So I just followed him around like a puppy. Mm-hmm. And then my brother, he's a lefty. He was a setter and an opposite for BYU. They ran a 6'2" back then. That's how old it was. But he would just tell me to go hit that ball against the wall because I'm like, how do you get a good phone call? Because I would watch these like really pretty girls just fall all over themselves with these guys. And I'm like, dude, I want to play that game.
So you had ulterior motive.
I definitely did, even at that young age. So he put me up against the wall and told me just to hit that ball against the wall as many times as you can. And would make me lay down on my back and then shut the ball 500 times. And I would just do that. I would do that. And then slowly start to pepper with him and do different things and get into it. But I didn't even play in high school or anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a whole nother story there. But he was basically the catalyst. He's the one that
kind of got you into it.
Yeah, I would watch him play, and he played a lot of doubles too, and he and his partner, they just couldn't be touched. They were that good, and I was just like, yeah, that looks awesome. I'm doing that,
dude. That's awesome. So you got to Utah, and you decided where did you go? So you went to UVSC at the time, right?
Yeah. Oh, actually, right before my mission, it was Utah Tech, and then it became Utah Valley Community College.
Oh, really? Was it Utah Tech before?
It was.
I went there when it was UVSC. So.
Okay. Yeah, and so when I got back off my mission, it was UVSC.
Oh, okay.
And now it's UVU. So it's just, it's had. I mean, they're the biggest college I think in the state.
Oh yeah, they are.
Like 40,000 students or something, which is crazy.
So you got there, you just decided to try out for the team, or?
Oh, I was the plan for sure. I just couldn't wait to get back and do that, and so I knew Lori Richards. She was the head coach for the women's team. I knew her from before. And she became kind of like my volleyball mom up here because she was just so dialed into the whole, the culture of volleyball in Utah County, and she was just awesome. And she helped me kind of get hooked up with those guys. And I went to tryouts, and I just saw a bunch of these guys, and had seen a couple of them here and there playing doubles, playing outdoor volleyball, and yeah, I had a good tryout, made the team, and it was awesome.
Yeah, man. I remember you playing those days. I don't want to, embarrass you in front of everyone, but you were pretty freaking good.
That's nice of you to say. And it was, it was a club in college. So, I mean, we weren't, we're always considered like the little brother of BYU.
Yeah.
And they're close to getting sanctioned at this point. They have been a couple times, but for whatever reason, they just can't seem to get over that hump.
Cool. Well, just before we get into kind of your cancer survivor story, which is fascinating, I did want to ask you about BYU volleyball. How did you get your color commentator for BYU for what, 18 years, something like that?
It's been a long time.
Long time?
Yeah, I think 04, 05 is when I started. So one of the biggest names in the country for volleyball is Carl McGowan. And he was the head coach. His son, Chris McGowan, who's now a huge deal also with Gold Medal Squared, which is when Carl started, and he's continued on with. Anyway, we would go, this is after college. There's a place in Provo, the apartment complex that had its own indoor volleyball court. So we would go on Saturdays a day. And this one day, Chris was there playing, and he and I had been friends for a long time. So he pulled me aside at the end. He said, "Hey, Holly Rowe is walking away from BYU TV." And Chris was doing the color commentating at that time, and he wanted to move over to do the play-by-play. And he's like, "So we're looking for a color commentator. Would you want to do some TV?" And I'm like, "Oh, Wayne, that sounds so scary. I'm not doing that." And he's like, "Oh, all right. Well, I figured I'd ask." I'm like, "Well, hang on. Don't give up that easy. Like, what do I got to do?" And so he had me go in and introduce myself to the producer, and he had a bunch of VHS tapes. That's how long ago this was. Wow. And he said, "Here, watch these, and you'll kind of get an idea of what, who the color commentator is, what they're supposed to be doing." And so I did that. And we started at that time. We would only do like 3 or 4, maybe 5, matches throughout the whole year. And it was so scary, but it was so fun. And I'm one of those guys that I'm a nervous talker. And so you get me on there, and once the camera's off me and we're just talking volleyball, like, it was just kind of just fun. Yeah. I'm just making fun of the players, and they'd go over the crowd, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I look like the guy from RoboCop," or whatever. And I'm just like these random things and these movie quotes that I would do, and they liked it. And apparently the people would call in. I don't even know what they did back then. They didn't use an app because there wasn't an app at that time. So I don't know what they would do, but they would, the feedback was that they enjoyed my personality. And so it was like, cool. And they just kept inviting me back, and
here you are.
Here it is, like 18 years later.
So cool, man.
So funny.
So listen, I have to ask you, I know there's been a lot of great moments in BYU volleyball, but is there a moment that you were there as a commentator that you'll never forget, or that really stuck out to you as a commentator?
I don't know about a moment. There have been some players that have come through there. One of them would have to be Taylor Sander. Before he even came to BYU, my friends would always go down to the Manhattan Sixes, and a really big event down in Manhattan Beach, California. And my friend came back, and he's like, "Dude, this year there was this kid, he's like 17, and he would fly, and he was hitting the ball over the block on the sand, in the sand in Hermosa, Manhattan is super deep." He's like, "This 17-year-old kid was just bouncing balls, some of the biggest blocks in volleyball history, old, young. And this 17-year-old kid was just destroying everybody." Anyway, the next year, Taylor Sander comes to BYU, and my friend's like, "That's the kid. That's Taylor Sander." And I'm like, "Okay." Anyway, so 4 years at BYU, and this kid that we would always call him like this era's Karch Karai, because, obviously Karch is like the Michael Jordan of volleyball, indoor and outdoor.
Oh yeah. And
that's been Taylor Sander. Now he's done playing indoor overseas, and now he's just playing outdoor with Taylor Crabb, who's also a phenom. And so anyway, it was just being able to be there while he did his thing in college before he went out to the world to become one of the greatest ever. Pretty cool.
That is really cool. Front row seat to that.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's get into your story, and I hope I know you've told me a little bit about this. It's pretty dramatic stuff. But you're working. I don't know where you're working at the time, doing color commentating. Tell me when things started to, with your health, kind of decline.
Well, it was in 2014. I was doing this thing for the LDS Church. It was like a leadership program called Wood Badge, and I'm down in the mountains behind Payson, Utah, at their little scout camp area, and we're doing this thing, and it's like a 2-week thing, and it's full time. You camp there the whole thing, and I look, and there's a mole on my side that's just gotten huge. It's ugly, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, man, that's weird, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it literally, like, it just went rogue. This mole did, and so. Well, I was doing construction at the time. I had my own little construction company. I didn't have any insurance or anything. So I was freaking out that if I did go in, it was just going to just bankrupt me to try to figure this thing out. So it was like Obamacare or something. I finally figured it out, went into my family doctor, and I said, hey, take a look at this mole. This thing is like, it's bleeding. Like, it's just weird. And this dude, like, no joke, I'm not making this up. He took a razor blade and like shaved off the top of it for a biopsy. And I'm like, ow, like what? Like no warning. Like no nothing, like no shot, no Novocaine, nothing. Just, carved off it. Anyway, he's like, oh, I'm sure it's nothing. It's probably just a ruptured, then some long word that I couldn't say if I wanted to. And anyway, a week later, I get a phone call from his nurse. And it's kind of a sketchy week, right? I'm like, man, what is this thing? And what's going on? Is this good news, bad news? So I get a call from his nurse, and she is just chipper and just, hi, Steve, how are you? How's your day? And I'm like, cool. Well, if that's her attitude, it's got to be good news, right? And so she's like, yeah, so you have malignant melanoma, stage 3B. And I'm like, hold on. I'm like, melanoma's bad, right? And she's like, oh, yeah, that's the worst skin cancer you can get. I'm like, oh, okay. What does that mean? Yeah, we're going to need you to come in right away. And we're scheduling for an operation, and I'm like, God. And literally, like, my world just caved in on me for a second.
Yeah, like literally not being sick at all. I'm sure you're feeling great too.
Yeah, there's like, other than that mole, which it didn't really hurt that much. It hurt a little. Yeah. Once that guy took the razor blade to it, it did. But it was like one of those things where I'm like, wait, 3B, isn't 4 like the worst? I'm like, okay, did I go through the alphabet to get to 4? Like, how do I? The whole thing was just okay. And I got off the phone. I was so mad at the way she handled it, because she wasn't like somber. She wasn't like, hey, I'd like you to come in. We'd like to talk to you. It was just like, hey, Steve, yeah, you've got cancer. It's the worst you could ever get. And I'm like, yeah, anyway, that was my intro to this whole world of cancer. And so and in fact, I didn't even tell my wife. I was so like, really, just blown away by the news. I just drove around for a couple hours, and this is the funniest thing. I went shopping. I went to the Traverse outlets and spent a couple $100, which we didn't have, on like beach clothes, because it was like May or something like that, and it was the summer was just about to start. And I went and splurged on clothes for myself, which is just kind of funny. But anyway, so it turned out they scanned me and everything, and it was one of my lymph nodes it had just started to get into. And that's scary, because apparently when it gets into your lymph node system, like, it goes everywhere fast.
And how long was this when did you find this out after you knew the news, that it had reached your lymph nodes?
So she told me, she goes, we got to get you in for scans, and we're going to do the surgery and everything. And the scans, you get the results pretty quick with that. And so they told me that, it's in one of your lymph nodes in your left groin. So we're going to just pull all your lymph nodes out. I'm like, I don't even know what a lymph node is. Is this bad? Like, do I need these? Anyway.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. To what you reacted to.
It is. If you can't laugh, if you can't have a sense of humor about things, like, you better just pack it in, because anytime, anything in life is, you got to have a sense of humor. Anyway. True. And that's just, she told me, she says, yeah, it's gone into one of your lymph nodes early. Sorry. In fact, I never did get feeling back of my upper, I guess that's my quad area on my left leg. It's still weird. The nerves got, I don't know, mishandled. I don't know how it works. But anyway, so that thing is, I had the surgery. and this is the other funny thing, the surgeon, she was awesome. I can't remember her name, but she was great. She's like, you really should do chemotherapy. And I was like, really, chemo? And she's like, yeah. And then she gives me the sales pitch on chemo. It's going to be over a year and it's going to be brutal and it's going to be the worst thing you've ever done in your life. If you don't, 50% chance it's going to come back and it'll come back to your brain. And I said, okay, so if I do chemo, like there's no chance it'll come back. Oh, it'll lessen it by about 15%. I'm like,
15%. Yeah.
You want me to do a year and just be in hell for a year for 15%? I'm like, nah, you're a horrible salesman. I'm not doing that. So I didn't do the chemo or anything. And then it was literally a year and a half later that I was working at Vision, a solar, doing like the first ever failed solar. And I was working this and all of a sudden my thumbs, I couldn't text. My thumbs weren't working. And I was like, that's weird. So I get back on my computer and I start trying to type and I look up at the screen to what I had just typed. It was just total gibberish. And I'm like, what? So I, clear it all out and I start typing again, gibberish. And I'm like, so now I'm watching my hands and I'm noticing that my hands aren't cooperating like they're supposed to. And I have a buddy that was sitting right next to me. I'm like, dude, something's up. And he's all, what are you talking about? And I go, I don't know. I can't type. I can't text. Like my body's just not responding. And he's like, that's weird. And he like turns back and goes back to work. I'm like, huh, okay. And so I sat there for a minute.
Sounds like a you problem.
And I'm like, that's nothing to do with me. And I don't know. Yeah. So I sitting there by myself and I'm thinking, well, I probably just, because I have a thing with energy drinks. Unfortunately, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're the best thing and get everybody hooked on energy drinks, but I am. I have at least one a day. And so at the time, I'm like, well, I probably just need an energy drink. I'm just tired or something. And I was taking some Adderall as well for ADD. And I was like, maybe it's bad Adderall. Like, anyway, so I go a few days and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. This is in November. Actually, no, it had to be October. But it's cold, right? And so I remember standing outside talking to a friend and all of a sudden I have this really cold sensation and I look down and I'm pouring my energy drink down the front of me.
Whoa.
And I'm like, what? And my friend's all, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. And it's just weird little like cognitive things that were going on.
And sorry to jump in. So this was what, a year and a half after your diagnosis?
Yeah. So
you weren't doing anything to mitigate it?
No, I wasn't doing anything.
You're like, I'm just going to roll the dice.
Yeah. I'm like, well, 50%. That means 50% chance it won't come back. All right, cool. Let's go with that. Yeah. Well, it did. And so that's how, it came back because you started having these issues. Yeah. Because and again, at this time, I'm like, what is going on? And you know how guys are. Guys are just like, I don't ask for directions. I don't need help. I know how to do that. I'm a man. I'll just power through. And that was kind of my attitude. It was just like, well, I'll just get through it. We had a church volleyball thing that weekend. And I was like, and I'm getting all this people like, hey, you're coming, right? And I'm like, yeah, something's going on with me. They're like, yeah, whatever. Like, you suck. Like, you're going to be the best on the team. I'm like, no, really though. Like something is really messed up in my head right now. I don't know what's going on. And they're like, yeah, haha, very funny. We'll see you at 7. I'm like, all right. So I go to this thing and the guy, like I walk in the door and he chucks me a ball and I go to grab it and it just bounces off my chest and I'm all, uh-oh. I'm like, this is not good. We tried to pepper for a minute and I'm like, I told you, dude, something's wrong. We play this game and I'm literally the worst on the team. Like I have no depth perception. I have no coordination. And my friend, they're mad at me. Like they're yelling at me, like, stop messing around. And I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, something is up. I don't know what's going on, but
I literally poured a monster drink on my chest.
So anyway, the next day was on my wife's side, her aunt had passed away. And so there's a funeral for her. And I'm at this point, I'm freaking out. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like something's really wrong and it's not getting better. And we're sitting there at the lunch afterwards and my niece is sitting across the table from me and I'm eating a salad and I think it was my left hand just keeps finding its way into my salad. And she's like, Uncle Steve, why do you keep putting your hand in your salad? And I look down and I got ranch all over my sleeve and my hand and I'm like, what? And so I'm just messing around, and I wipe it off or whatever. Boom, it goes right back into my salad again. And I don't even know, I'm not even paying attention. And at that point I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, this is stupid. So my wife was chasing one of my little kids around somewhere, and I leaned over to her parents and I said, hey, tell Jen, I'll be back in a minute. And I just left and I drove myself to the emergency room.
Really?
And I pull into the parking spot and I go inside. I remember the lady asked me what's wrong. And I said, well, I've got some major issues going on, but I was able to tell her my name, tell her my age and whatever. And I think I even filled out some stuff. And literally it was like, they called my name to come in and the guy started asking me questions and I couldn't remember anything. I didn't know my name. I didn't know who the president was. Like, all of a sudden, like, it just nosedived. And I was like, what? And so they wheeled me off. And the next thing I know, I'm in the recovery room and they're like, hey, it's not a stroke. My wife's there, right? And fine. At the time, they thought it was 3 brain tumors. And then my wife closes it. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, brain is bawling because she's, they had to find a way to get her, find where I was. And then she had to come over. So she's just bawling. They're like, well, it's not a stroke, but we did feel brain tumors. And then it dawned on me like, oh yeah, she's so come back to the brain.
No.
And so they did another scan on me and it actually was 6 brain tumors that were there. The reason I was having all these cognitive issues is one of them was bleeding and it was obviously causing issues. And so they did a quick emergency surgery and they pulled that one. I was about the size of a golf ball, they said. They pulled that one out and then they radiated the other 5. The rest of the story is pretty quick, but they radiated the other 5. And so they're like, okay, we're going to start all these different treatments on you. And they tried so many different things and nothing worked. And oh, by the way, at this point, they tell me I'm stage 4 brain cancer, which I had never heard of anybody that survived stage 4 brain cancer.
So what were you mind me asking, what were your thoughts when you heard that for the first time?
That scared me a little bit. And it was weird though, because I wasn't like, oh, poor me, and just bawling and just don't talk to me. Yeah, it wasn't anything like that. It was just like, wow, really? Like, I'm going to check out now. I'm only 45. I was just about to be 45. I was 44 at the time.
Wow.
And I'm like, no way. My youngest was like 6 months. I have 6. I didn't even tell you, but I married, I have a son and 5 daughters. And my youngest was only 6 months at the time. And I'm like, wait, this can't be right. And so they're trying all these different things on me and nothing is working. And I get another scan and now I've got 8 new tumors that have popped up. And that was probably even more than when they told me I had brain cancer. When they told me that I had 8 new tumors pop up, I thought, oh shoot, that's it, man. I'm out.
Wow.
There's no way I'm coming back from this.
Talk about facing mortality, man.
Yeah.
That's got to be a unique experience to know, hey, my time on the earth is like limited.
And I'm kind of like a lazy guy. And I'm one of those guys that would love to just lay and just watch movies and TV and play video games all Saturday and not like get the yard done and get the house. And like, I'm just lazy. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, you have wasted your whole life just wandering around and with no direction. I remember just having that thought to myself, like, man, I'm going to be done. And I haven't even lived like half a life. I've lived like a quarter life because my half life that I've lived, I've been so lazy for most of it. So I remember sitting there thinking like, wow, okay. And they're like, well, we have it's a brand new treatment that we can, we're going to see if your insurance will cover it. And I remember them telling me that President Jimmy Carter, who was like 91 at the time, had almost the exact same symptoms as I did, and that he had been on it for a month or so, and he was like cancer free. And I'm like, well, yeah, let's do that.
You do that option.
And right at the same time as this was going on, my brother-in-law, and for those of you listening that are LDS, I mentioned that he is a bishop, so he is a strong
ecclesiastical leader of the church.
But he had found a guy that had his own still in the backwoods of like Wyoming or something that was making what was called Rick Simpson oil. It was based on this guy in Canada named Rick Simpson that had found a way to concentrate cannabis oil so it's really, really potent, and it was curing cancer. It also is really good for pain and things like that. So his oldest daughter has ATN, which is like a really, really bad, like the most painful, I don't even know what ATN stands for, but it's something in her jaw and it's just constant pain. So he had found this guy to try to see if maybe that would help his daughter. Anyway, he mentioned to me, he's like, hey, I've got this number. You should call this guy and see. So I call this guy and he tells me, hey, you know what? I have a guy that was just a couple years younger than you. The doctors had sent him home to die because he had inoperable brain tumors. He was taking 2 pills a day, which 1 pill is a gram, and that's with concentrated, and this is the fully leaded cannabis, right? This is
THC,
like crazy amounts of THC, and it's concentrated. So 1 will just send you to the moon. 2, you're like unconscious, like you feel like you can't even function. So this poor guy, he was taking 2 a day, and within 3 months they had shrunk. In 6 months, they were, I can't remember. It's been a long time since we talked, but they had shrunk a ton. And then in 9 months, they were gone. And he was like, had no more tumors in his body. And it was like a couple years ago. So at that point, he was cancer free 2 years later. So between the new option that they had that they'd given President Carter and this cannabis pill, it kills me because I didn't have enough.
So you had to choose one or the other.
No, what I'm saying is I started them both at the same time. So I really don't know which did the heavy lifting. If it was this Pembro, which I guess it's like Coke and Pepsi, like there's Pembro and then there's Keytruda. I don't know if that or the cannabis did the heavy lifting, but either way, within 2 months, I had another scan and all the tumors were gone.
Whoa.
And that was probably midway through 2016, and I have been cancer-free ever since.
Wow, that's insane.
Crazy. All these things that they tried, there's what's called the blood-brain barrier, and nothing would get past there. So your brain doesn't even know that there's anything wrong. So these tumors are growing in the brains like do, go about their normal business without realizing that, hey, there's like death has sprung up here. And so the thing with this Pembro and also with the cannabis, it passes through that blood-brain barrier and wakes the brain up that, hey, these things aren't supposed to be here. Let's get rid of it. And so, again, I don't know which one did the heavy lifting, but here I am 7+ years later, cancer-free.
That's insane.
It's crazy.
So what was I'm just trying to dig into your mentality during that time. Was it hard to keep your spirits up, or did you ever lose hope during that time? I'm just thinking to myself, I don't know how mentally I would have stayed in the game. I think that's a lot of it too, isn't it?
I think it absolutely is a lot of it. And I've heard that even before my own experience, that laughter is the best medicine. You got to keep your hopes up, and your spirit alive, and humor is the best medicine, and all these types of things. And in reality, when I was doing the cannabis pills, like I was basically sleeping, and that's part of the whole thing. Is part of the reason why it works is your body. When your body is resting, that's when it can heal itself. And so I literally was like checked out for like 6 months. But there was a time, and I don't remember exactly when this was. Because I've always heard about depression and anxiety, and I grew up in the 80s. We didn't talk about that stuff in the 80s.
Yeah.
I remember like if anybody like went to a counselor or a shrink, it's like, oh my gosh, you're crazy. I didn't know you were crazy. Like that was the mentality. Yeah. Like you go to a shrink, oh my gosh, you're nuts. Yeah. Like, so even though I had heard about anxiety and depression, I had never really dealt with it or even thought about it or talked about it. Well, there was a point. And at the time, I didn't even realize what was going on, but I literally, for a while there, I couldn't shake it off. Like I was down. I was really, really down. And I was a jerk. My wife will tell you, she's like, if you ever go through cancer again, I'm going to go to a motel because you're a bud when you're trying to, get through that. I was like, really? Was I? She's like, you were so hard to live with. And I was like, okay. So I didn't know. Cause again, I was like out of it, but there was probably about a 6-month time in there when I was so down and I couldn't ever climb out of it on my own. Like I remember, and I would tell people like, oh my gosh, stop being depressed all the time. Like just rub some dirt on it and, just smile your way out of it or whatever. And I think I had that experience to kind of wake me up to the fact that that's not how depression works. That's not how anxiety works. You don't just wave it off. Like it's real and it's deep and it's consuming like everything. It affects everything. And so, there was about a 6-month time in there when I really, really was down, and I could recognize it. I could feel it, but I had no idea why. and I didn't know how to fix it or change it. And you're going to ask me like, well, how did you overcome it? I don't remember doing anything different, but eventually that storm passed and the clouds just kind of eventually separated, and I was able to kind of climb out of it and become myself again. So
that's crazy. Well, let me ask you just real quick. What was that feeling like when they told you were cancer free? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh, there's a really cool story that I forgot to tell you.
Yeah.
So when I got into the emergency room and they had to do that emergency surgery, my brother-in-law, the same one, and my father-in-law gave me a priesthood blessing. In that blessing, he told me that I was going to be healed and I was going to be just fine and live a normal life. And I kind of remember, but kind of don't. I was pretty out of it at the time, and they kind of reminded me after the blessing, like, yeah, can you believe it? He's like, I didn't want to say, well, they weren't my words, is what my brother-in-law told me. And it's funny, I told my dad this story. He's like, oh, cool, then you're good. And I'm like, what? This was like early on, right? Before any of the other stuff that's gone on. He's like, oh yeah, you were told you'd be fine. So cool. So every time I had scans and they said, yeah, you're still cancer free, my dad would be like, well, of course you are. You already knew you were going to be, cancer free because of his blessing. And his faith on that whole thing is way surpasses mine, because I was just like, every time I would have these scans, I would just be like, here we go. Yeah. Here we go. And so, it's always a huge family text to everybody. Hey, I'm cancer free again. And I was having these scans like monthly, and then every 2, every 3, and every 6. Yeah. So it's been an amazing thing, but it's always a little sketchy to know if it's ever going to come back, which again, and it very well could, but I've had 7 amazing years.
Awesome. So just real quick. So, I think a lot of this story has kind of motivated for what you do now with Mind and Body. You want to talk a little bit about that and how that, how the products and the things this experience has helped you, align with those products?
Absolutely. In fact, I've been in sales forever, and my brother-in-law was consulting at the time for this company, which was Earthspring Organics, which went to Earthspring Medicinals, Earthspring Healing, and now we're Mind and Body Naturals. But he was consulting for them, and he had a really good plan to move forward. And they're like, okay, if you want to come in and execute and be the CEO. And he told me about that, and he said, look, I need some help with a few things up there if you want to come up and take a look. And at the time, they were growing hemp and selling the flower wholesale to companies. And so, I would come up to Logan, and they had a huge grow room, and it looked like a Cheech and Chong movie. And I didn't know, I had experience because I grew up in California. I had a lot of experience with cannabis and what it looks like. And literally, I could not tell the difference between cannabis and hemp. It's literally the same thing. It's just bred differently. One is bred to have more THC than one's bred to have basically none. Looks and smells just like the real. So it was weird. I'm like, are you okay to have this stuff up here? Like, are the cops going to bust in any minute? And he's like, no, it's hemp. It's not. And I'm like, whatever. It looks the same. Anyway, so I got involved that way. And because they were doing CBD, and CBD was a big part of, I feel like, what saved my life. It was very, I felt drawn to be a part of this company, and we don't have enough time, but I could tell you a few stories of people personal that I delivered the product to them and had them try it out with depression and anxiety. And then another one, real quick. So the one sister had really bad anxiety. She started taking our product for that. And she told me about her brother who had started having epilepsy, like seizures, at the age of 9. He was 32 at that time, and he was having them all the time. And he was, I don't think he could even live like a normal life. I don't think he was married or anything. He probably he was kind of in a bad way because of these seizures, and they were really bad. And I said, well, that's not what this other product that we make is for, but I've heard that CBD can do wonders for stuff like that. So here, take this and give it to him. he went like 3 months without any seizures or without any, there was these other things that would happen to him before a seizure came. Those weren't happening. He was a lot more lucid. His parents would talk to him on the phone every day, and sometimes he would just check out. He stopped doing that, and it was pretty amazing. And again, that's not even what we were trying to do with that product, but that's how powerful CBD is. And I know it's still a question mark, and it's like the wild one stuff. Right? Oh, a lot of controversy. And because people don't really understand it. I have friends that are like, dude, you bring me that CBD. And I'm like, that's not what CBD is. There's nothing in there that's going to make you high. There's just a lot of healing properties within it that can really help with these different things. And that's the other thing. Like, people, oh, you're just a CBD company. No, we're really not. CBD is one of the ingredients because it worked in the trials. And John, my brother-in-law, was very, very serious about making sure these products worked. He did not want to be like a Me Too company that says, oh, CBD is selling right now? Cool, let's do that. Let's slap our name on it and sell CBD. No, he was like, let's figure out some of these areas where the medical profession has kind of not done that great, like with depression and anxiety and pain. And then that's the area that we went after. And it's been pretty awesome. It's been a fun little adventure for the last
it's been fun to see you guys launch. You guys just launched your new website, mindandbody.com. Is that where people can go to check you guys out?
Yeah, mindandbodynaturals.com.
Mindandbodynaturals.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
And new packaging, and it's pretty awesome stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
We'll put a link in the description too. But Steve, listen, we got to run, but thank you so much for coming by and sharing your story. It's super inspirational, and we're glad you're here to share it. So,
well, thank you for having me on. And I hope somebody got something out of this. It was a pretty amazing story for me.
It was. It's an amazing story. So thank you. And guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Ecom Life Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Ecom Life Podcast. Ecom Life Podcast is produced by Quadra. Monetize your creativity with Quadra, an e-commerce platform created by sellers for sellers. To learn more, visit goquadra.com. We appreciate your time and hope today's episode has enriched your understanding of the online business world. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to stay up to date with the latest trends, strategies, and success stories, please consider subscribing to the podcast and following us on social media at Ecom Life Podcast.